The auctioneer's voice echoed through the empty municipal building like a death sentence. Going once, going twice. Jennifer Torres raised her hand before her brain could stop her. $700. It was almost everything she had left. Almost everything standing between her 3 children and absolute nothing. The auctioneer squinted at her from his podium, confusion flickering across his weathered face. "Ma'am, do you understand what you're bidding on? This is a condemned industrial property. The remediation costs alone."
If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today.
$700, Jennifer repeated, her voice steadier than her hands. Behind her, through the building's grimy windows, she could see her 2003 Dodge Caravan in the parking lot. Inside that van were Sofia, age 9, and the twins, Diego and Carmen, both 6, along with everything they owned, stuffed into garbage bags and 2 collapsing cardboard boxes. They had 4 days until the shelter waitlist opened up again. 4 days to find somewhere, anywhere to sleep that wasn't the front seat of a minivan while her children shivered in the back. "Do I hear 750? The auctioneer tried one more time, his eyes scanning the nearly empty room. 3 real estate developers sat in the front row, all of them shaking their heads. They knew something Jennifer didn't. They knew that buying the old Riverside municipal incinerator plant for any amount of money was financial suicide. Nobody bid against her. Nobody wanted a death trap. "Sold," the auctioneer finally said, bringing his gavel down with a crack that sounded like breaking bones. $700 to the young lady in the back. God help you. Jennifer signed paperwork she barely understood, her hand cramping as she scrawled her name across page after page. Liability waivers, environmental disclosures, warnings about asbestos and lead paint and structural instability, and a dozen other ways the building might kill her. The clerk handed her a thick manila envelope and a ring of keys, so old they looked like they'd been forged in the 19th century. "The property is located at 4800 Industrial Way," she said, her tone suggesting Jennifer had just purchased a ticket to hell. "I'd recommend hiring a structural engineer before entering, and maybe a hazmat team, and definitely a lawyer." Jennifer clutched the keys like a lifeline and walked back to the van on legs that didn't quite feel attached to her body. "Did we get it?" Sofia asked the moment Jennifer opened the door. Her oldest daughter had her father's dark eyes and her grandmother's fierce hope, that stubborn belief that tomorrow could be better, even when today was a disaster. "We got it, baby." "Is it a house?" Diego pressed his face against the window, fogging the glass with his breath. "It's bigger than a house." "Like a mansion." Carmen's voice was small and scared. They'd been sleeping in the van for 11 days now. 11 days of gas station bathrooms and parking lot dinners and pretending this was all one big camping adventure. "Like an old factory, it needs work, a lot of work, but it has walls and a roof, and it's ours." The GPS took them to the industrial district on the east side of Riverside, where factories had thrived in the 1950s and died slow deaths in the decades since. Abandoned warehouses lined the streets like tombstones. Broken windows stared out like empty eyes. Graffiti covered every available surface, some of it art, most of it anger. The Riverside Municipal Incinerator plant sat at the end of Industrial Way, separated from its neighbors by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Someone had spray-painted "Warning hazardous materials" across the main gate, and someone else had added, "Keep out or die beneath it." Jennifer parked outside the fence and sat very still, staring at what she'd just bought for $700. The building was massive, easily 3 stories tall and stretching the length of a city block. Red brick walls rose toward a gray sky, punctuated by hundreds of broken windows. The main smokestack, a towering concrete cylinder that must have been 50 feet tall, listed slightly to the left like a drunk giant. Rust streaked down its sides like dried blood. Parts of the roof had collapsed inward, creating dark cavities where rain and time had done their worst work. Vines climbed the eastern wall, their leaves brown and brittle with approaching winter. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown, with small trees forcing their way through asphalt, like nature refusing to surrender. "Mom," Sofia whispered, "it looks scary." She was right. It looked terrifying. It looked condemned and haunted and dangerous and completely uninhabitable. It looked like home. "It's going to be an adventure," Jennifer said, injecting false brightness into her voice. The same brightness she'd used when telling them they'd be sleeping in the van for just a few nights. The same brightness she'd used when explaining why they couldn't afford school lunches anymore. The same brightness that was starting to feel like lying. They found a gap in the fence where someone had cut through the chain link. Jennifer went first, pulling the metal aside so the children could squeeze through. Dead leaves crunched under their feet. The air smelled like rust and rot and the particular kind of emptiness that settles over places humans have abandoned. The main entrance was a massive steel door, corroded orange by decades of weather. Jennifer tried 3 keys before finding one that fit. The lock screamed when she turned it, metal grinding against metal, but it opened. The door swung inward on hinges that shrieked like wounded animals. Inside was darkness. Jennifer pulled out her phone's flashlight and stepped across the threshold. The beam cut through shadows, revealing a cavernous space that might have been a lobby once. The floor was concrete stained with oil and chemicals and time. The ceiling rose 20 feet above them, crossed with exposed beams and hanging electrical conduits. A metal staircase spiraled upward into darkness on the far side of the room. "Stay close," Jennifer warned as the children followed her inside. "Don't touch anything. Watch where you step." They moved deeper into the building, their footsteps echoing off walls covered in peeling industrial paint. Every surface was coated in decades of grime and dust. The flashlight beam caught glimpses of old machinery, rusted metal behemoths whose original purposes were now mysteries. Pipes snaked across the ceiling. Doors with faded warning signs opened onto pitch-black rooms. The building felt enormous from the outside, but inside it seemed infinite. Corridor after corridor branched off the main space. Rooms led to other rooms, led to vast open floors where industrial equipment still squatted like sleeping dinosaurs. "This is where they burn trash?" Diego asked, his voice small in the vastness. "A long time ago, sweetie, before you were born, before I was born, even." Jennifer had done some quick research at the public library after hearing about the auction. The Riverside Municipal Incinerator plant had opened in 1952, when burning garbage seemed like the height of modern waste management. It had operated for 30 years before environmental regulations shut it down in 1982. Since then, it had sat empty, owned by the city, costing money in taxes and liability insurance while nobody could figure out what to do with it. Until today. Until a desperate single mother bought it for $700 and 3 children's worth of hope. They explored the ground floor methodically, Jennifer testing every step before letting the children follow. Most of the rooms were too dangerous. Ceilings sagging, floors rotted through, chemicals God knew what that had stained the concrete in rainbow swirls. But on the north side, in what must have been the administrative offices, they found 3 rooms that seemed almost intact. The windows were broken and the walls were water-stained, but the floors felt solid and the ceilings showed no signs of immediate collapse. "We can camp here," Jennifer decided, looking at a space that might have been a manager's office once. It was maybe 15 feet square with built-in metal shelving on one wall and a window that overlooked the parking lot.
If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this.
Just for tonight. Tomorrow we'll explore more and see what else is usable. They hauled their garbage bags in from the van. Everything they owned in the world. Sleeping bags and pillows. A camp stove Jennifer had bought at a thrift store. Changes of clothes and the children's school supplies. And the 3 stuffed animals they'd refused to leave behind. Jennifer set up camp with practiced efficiency, creating little nests for each child against the walls where they'd be warmest. She pulled out the last of their food, peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices that were starting to brown, water bottles and the granola bars someone at the food bank had slipped her with a knowing look. They ate dinner sitting in a circle on the floor, their flashlights creating a small bubble of light in the darkness. "Tell us a story, Mama," Carmen requested, exactly like she'd been doing every night in the van, as if stories could make concrete floors feel like mattresses and empty buildings feel like homes. So Jennifer did. She told them about a family of explorers who discovered a secret castle hidden in the middle of a city. A castle that had been waiting for brave adventurers to claim it and fill it with love and laughter. "Are we the explorers?" Sofia asked, even though she was too old to fully believe anymore. "We're the explorers." "And this is the castle?" "This is the castle." The children fell asleep one by one, exhausted by stress and uncertainty, and the particular kind of tired that comes from trying to be brave when you're scared. Jennifer tucked blankets around them, kissed their foreheads, and then sat with her back against the metal shelving watching them breathe. $700. She'd spent $700, almost every penny from her final paycheck, from the factory job that had laid her off 6 weeks ago, on a condemned industrial building that would probably kill them all from asbestos exposure. But they had walls, they had a roof, and for the first time in 11 days, they had something that felt almost like shelter. Jennifer pulled out the manila envelope the clerk had given her and started reading through the paperwork by flashlight. Most of it was legal jargon she didn't understand, warnings and disclosures and page after page of the city absolving itself of responsibility for anything that happened here. But buried in the middle, almost like an afterthought, was a document titled Previous Ownership Records and Historical Trust Information. Jennifer skimmed it without much interest. Property transfers, tax records, the boring bureaucratic history of a building nobody wanted. Her eyes were starting to close when a name stopped her cold. Trustees of the Maria Elena Torres Memorial Trust. Torres, her maiden name, her grandmother's name. Jennifer sat up straighter, suddenly wide awake. She read the paragraph more carefully. According to the document, the incinerator plant had been purchased in 1985, 3 years after it closed, by something called the Maria Elena Torres Memorial Trust. The trust had held the property for decades, paying taxes and maintenance fees, before finally transferring it to the city 10 years ago, when the trust's funds were depleted. Maria Elena Torres. Jennifer's grandmother had been named Maria Torres, but that was a common name. There were probably thousands of Maria Torreses in California alone. Except, Jennifer dug deeper into the envelope, pulling out a second folder she hadn't noticed before. This one was older, the paper yellowed with age. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery, the ink faded but still legible. "To whom it may concern," it began in elegant cursive. "This property is held in trust for my descendants, specifically for any granddaughter or great-granddaughter bearing my name or my husband's name, who finds herself in circumstances requiring courage, desperation, and hope." Jennifer's hands started shaking. "I purchased this building in 1985 because nobody else wanted it, because it was considered worthless, because it reminded me of myself at your age, discarded, condemned, written off by people who should have known better. But I knew something they didn't. I knew what was hidden beneath the garbage. I knew what treasures could be found in places everyone else had abandoned. If you are reading this, then you have claimed what is rightfully yours. But the building is only the beginning. The real inheritance waits below, in the place where fire once burned away everything worthless, leaving only what was valuable. Welcome home, my dear one. Your abuela has been waiting for you. The letter was signed Maria Elena Torres, dated 1985, with a postscript. P.S. The third key opens the door you're looking for. Follow the heat, even though the fires are cold. Jennifer stared at the letter until the words blurred. Her grandmother, her father's mother, had died when Jennifer was 8 years old. She barely remembered her, just vague impressions of a small woman with steel-gray hair, who spoke Spanish and smelled like cinnamon, and whose hands were always busy with something. She'd never known her grandmother owned anything. Her father certainly hadn't inherited wealth. He'd been a mechanic who drank too much and died too young, leaving Jennifer's mother to raise her alone in a series of increasingly crappy apartments. But this letter suggested something else entirely, something impossible. The real inheritance waits below. Jennifer looked at the ring of keys in her hand, 7 of them, all old and ornate. She counted to the third one, slightly larger than the others with a more elaborate bow. Follow the heat, even though the fires are cold. This was insane. She should be sleeping, not chasing cryptic instructions from a grandmother who'd been dead for 25 years. They had bigger problems, like finding drinkable water and figuring out if any part of this death trap was actually safe for children. But desperation makes people brave in dangerous ways. Jennifer stood up carefully, trying not to wake the kids. She grabbed her flashlight and the third key and stepped back out into the main corridor. The building felt different at night, darker, more alive somehow. Every sound echoed and multiplied. Her footsteps, her breathing, the distant groan of metal settling. Jennifer's heart hammered as she made her way back toward the central space with the spiral staircase. Follow the heat. In an incinerator plant, that would mean the furnaces, the burning chambers, the heart of the operation where garbage became ash. The ground floor had been administrative and receiving. The burning would have happened below. Jennifer found a staircase leading downward, marked with a faded sign. Combustion level, authorized personnel only. The stairs were metal grating, and they rang like bells under her feet. The air grew cooler as she descended, but also heavier somehow, thick with the memory of heat that had burned away decades ago. The basement level was vast and nightmarish. Industrial equipment loomed out of the darkness like sleeping monsters, conveyor belts frozen mid-motion, sorting mechanisms with mechanical arms outstretched, and in the center of it all, 3 massive furnaces, metal mouths big enough to walk through, dark and cold, but still radiating menace. Jennifer approached the closest furnace on trembling legs. The opening yawned before her like a cave entrance, the interior invisible in the darkness. She swept her flashlight beam inside, half expecting to find bones or treasure or monsters. Instead, she found a door. It was set into the back wall of the furnace chamber, completely hidden unless you climbed inside. Heavy steel, painted the same black as the furnace interior, with a single keyhole in the center. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat. She climbed into the furnace chamber. The metal floor was cold and smooth, designed to withstand temperatures that would turn garbage to ash. The door was real, solid, with a lock that looked substantially newer than the rest of the equipment. The third key slid in like it had been made for this moment. The door opened with a pneumatic hiss that suggested seals and climate control, and modern engineering completely out of place in this abandoned wreck of a building. Beyond the door was a room. No, not a room. A vault. Jennifer stepped through the doorway into a space that couldn't exist. The walls were concrete, reinforced with steel beams. LED lights flickered on automatically, revealing a climate-controlled chamber about 30 feet square. The floor was polished concrete, the air was cool and dry, and smelled like nothing at all. Carefully filtered, carefully maintained, and the room was full of metal boxes, hundreds of them, stacked on industrial shelving that lined every wall from floor to ceiling. Each box was labeled with dates and numbers that meant nothing to Jennifer. She pulled down the nearest box with shaking hands and opened it. Inside were bundles of cash, hundreds, thousands, all old bills, carefully wrapped in plastic with handwritten labels. 1987 Riverside property sale. Another bundle, 1989 business liquidation. Another, 1992 gold conversion. Jennifer opened another box, more cash, and another, gold coins carefully cataloged, and another, stock certificates from companies she'd never heard of, bearer bonds, property deeds to buildings across 3 states. Box after box after box, a lifetime of careful accumulation, hidden away in a place nobody would ever look, buried beneath garbage and fire and the ruins of industry. Jennifer sank to the floor, surrounded by wealth beyond her ability to comprehend, and started to laugh. The sound came out broken and desperate and absolutely unhinged. Her grandmother, quiet, unremarkable Maria Elena Torres, had been rich, not comfortable, not well off, rich, and she'd hidden it all here in a place everyone thought was worthless, waiting for a granddaughter desperate enough to buy a condemned incinerator plant for $700. Jennifer didn't know how long she sat there, laughing and crying and trying to make sense of the impossible. Eventually, she found another envelope taped to the inside of one of the boxes. This one was marked "Read First" in her grandmother's handwriting. Inside was a longer letter, on the same expensive stationery, written in Spanish and English, both. "My dearest granddaughter," it began, "if you have found this, then you have proven yourself worthy in the only way that matters. You were desperate enough to see value where others saw waste. I was born poor in Mexico and came to this country with nothing. I married your grandfather, who was kind but not ambitious. We had your father and we were happy, but we were always struggling, always one disaster away from losing everything. Then I learned a secret. The truly wealthy don't look wealthy. They look like everyone else. They hide their treasure where thieves can't find it and family can't fight over it. They build quietly and protect fiercely and wait for the right moment to reveal what they've built. I started with nothing and built this fortune piece by piece. Property investments, business sales, gold bought when it was cheap, stock in companies nobody believed in, every dollar carefully saved and hidden away because I knew that someday someone would need it. Your father didn't understand. He wanted easy money, quick success, flashy cars. When I wouldn't give him access to my fortune, he called me a miser and stopped speaking to me. He died thinking I had nothing. But I was never going to give it to someone who didn't understand its value. I was waiting for you, Carita, or someone like you, a woman desperate enough to buy garbage, brave enough to claim what everyone else rejected, strong enough to turn ash into gold. The money in this room is approximately $395 million, exact amount documented in the ledgers in box 47A. It includes cash, gold, property deeds, stocks, bonds, and business holdings across multiple states, all of it legally mine, all of it legally yours now. Use it wisely, use it well, use it to build something that lasts longer than either of us. And when people ask how you got it, tell them the truth. You found treasure in the trash. You saw value where others saw waste. You inherited what your abuela built from nothing. Welcome to the family business, my dear one. Welcome home. Jennifer read the letter 3 times before it started to feel real. $395 million. Hidden in a basement vault in a condemned incinerator plant nobody wanted, waiting for someone desperate enough, stupid enough, brave enough to claim it. She climbed back up the stairs on legs that felt like water. The children were still sleeping. Sofia curled protectively around the twins like she'd been doing since they lost the apartment. They looked peaceful in the flashlight glow, innocent and trusting and completely unaware that their mother had just bought them a castle made of ash and gold. Jennifer sat down beside them and pulled out her phone. No signal this deep in the industrial district, but she opened her notes app and started making lists. Things they'd need, people they'd have to call, lawyers and accountants and probably therapists, because you didn't go from homeless to multimillionaire overnight without some psychological whiplash. But underneath the practical lists, one thought kept circling through her mind. Her grandmother had known, had planned this, had built a fortune from nothing and hidden it away, waiting for someone exactly like Jennifer, someone who'd lost everything, someone who'd spent her last $700 on hope disguised as a condemned building. Outside, the November wind rattled the broken windows and howled through the abandoned machinery. Inside, Jennifer Torres, formerly homeless, currently exhausted and suddenly wealthy beyond measure, held her sleeping children and wondered what came next. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight they had walls and a roof and a secret worth $395 million hidden below ground. Tonight they had survived another day, and sometimes survival was enough. Sometimes it was everything. Jennifer's phone alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., dragging her out of restless sleep. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came crashing back, the auction, the building, the vault, the impossible fortune hiding beneath tons of abandoned industrial equipment. She'd dreamed about her grandmother last night, the real Maria Elena Torres, not the vague memory Jennifer had carried for decades. In the dream, her abuela had been standing in that vault, counting money with quick, efficient movements while fire roared in the furnaces above. "We're the same, you and I," Dream Maria had said. "We know how to find value in what others throw away." Sofia stirred first, blinking in the gray morning light filtering through broken windows. "Mom, is this real? Did we really buy this place?" "We really did, baby." "And we're staying here?" Jennifer thought about the vault below their feet, about $395 million in boxes carefully stacked and cataloged, about her grandmother's letter and her father's pride and the strange, impossible gift that came from being desperate enough to buy garbage. "For now," she said, "until we figure out what comes next." Diego and Carmen woke up slowly, the twins operating on their usual synchronized schedule. They were hungry. They were always hungry these days, and Jennifer heated their last 2 cans of soup on the camp stove while mentally calculating how long they could survive on the emergency $20 bill she'd hidden in her shoe. Except she didn't need to survive on $20 anymore. She had $395 million. The thought made her dizzy. "Kids," Jennifer said carefully as they ate their soup, straight from the pot with 3 spoons they were sharing, "I need to tell you something. I found something in the building last night. Something important." "Hidden treasure?" Diego asked, eyes lighting up with the kind of hope that 6-year-olds could still access easily. "Actually, yes. Real treasure. Money that belonged to my grandmother, your great-grandmother, that she left for us." "How much money?" Sofia was the practical one, always calculating, always worried. "A lot. More than we can spend in our whole lives. Enough to fix everything." The children stared at her. Carmen's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. Diego looked confused. Sofia looked suspicious, like this was another adult lie designed to make them feel better about sleeping on concrete floors. "Mom," Sofia said slowly, "are you okay? Did you sleep at all last night?" "I know it sounds crazy. I'll show you later. But first, I need to make some calls. We need lawyers and accountants, and we need food," Carmen interrupted. "Real food, not just soup." She was right. Treasure or no treasure, her children needed breakfast. Jennifer pulled out the 20 from her shoe and herded everyone into the van. They drove to the nearest diner, a place called Mel's that Jennifer had driven past 100 times but never had money to stop at. The warmth inside was like stepping into heaven. The smell of bacon and coffee and pancakes made Jennifer's mouth water and her stomach cramp. They hadn't had a real meal in longer than she wanted to admit. "Order anything you want," Jennifer told the children as they crowded into a cracked vinyl booth. "Anything?" Diego's eyes went wide. "Anything." They ordered like they'd never seen food before. Pancakes and eggs and bacon and hash browns and orange juice and chocolate milk and toast with about 6 different types of jelly. The waitress, a woman named Betty with bottle blonde hair and kind eyes, didn't comment on how the children attacked the food when it arrived, or how Jennifer's hands shook as she tried to drink her coffee, or how all 4 of them were wearing clothes that had seen better days. "You folks need anything else, you just holler," Betty said, refilling Jennifer's coffee cup without being asked. Jennifer's phone finally had signal. She pulled it out and stared at the screen, trying to figure out where to even start. You couldn't just Google, "I found 395 million in an incinerator plant. What do I do now?" Actually, you probably could, but Jennifer was terrified of what might happen if she started making calls. What if it was all a mistake? What if her grandmother's money was somehow illegal? What if the government seized everything? What if Jennifer Torres? She looked up to find a man standing beside their booth. He was old, 70s, maybe 80s, dressed in an expensive suit that looked out of place in a working-class diner. He had silver hair, warm brown eyes, and the kind of presence that suggested he was used to being listened to. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said. "Do I know you?" "Not yet, but I've been waiting for you." He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. "My name is Eduardo Reyes. I'm the attorney who's been managing your grandmother's trust for the past 37 years. Jennifer's heart stopped. "How did you—" "I've had the property under surveillance since the auction. When someone finally bought it yesterday, I was notified immediately. I've been waiting at this diner every morning for 6 weeks, hoping the buyer would eventually need breakfast." He gestured to the booth across from them. "May I sit?" Jennifer nodded, too stunned to speak. Eduardo slid into the booth and smiled at the children, who were watching him with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. "You must be Sofia, Diego, and Carmen. Your great-grandmother would have loved to meet you." "How do you know their names?" Sofia demanded, protective instincts firing. "Because I've been keeping track of your family for decades. It was part of my job, making sure that when the right person finally appeared, I'd be ready to help." "The right person?" Jennifer found her voice. "You mean someone named Torres?" "I mean someone desperate enough to buy a condemned building, someone with children to protect and nowhere else to turn. Someone who reminded me of Maria Elena when she first came to this country, poor, determined, and absolutely refusing to give up." Jennifer glanced at her children, then back to Eduardo. "The money in the vault, is it real?" "Every penny, and it's completely legal, I assure you. Your grandmother was meticulous about documentation. Every dollar accounted for, every investment properly recorded, every tax paid when it was supposed to be paid. $395 million. Give or take, the exact amount has fluctuated over the years with stock performance and property values. But yes, approximately $395 million in liquid and semi-liquid assets. Eduardo pulled out a tablet and began tapping through screens. You'll need to understand what you're inheriting. He walked her through it while the children finished their breakfast, and Betty kept the coffee coming. Properties across 3 states, commercial and residential. Stock in companies that had started as penny stocks in the 1980s and were now worth hundreds of millions. Gold purchased when it was $300 an ounce. Bearer bonds from the 1970s that were still valid. Business holdings in warehouses and storage facilities and industrial real estate. Your grandmother had a gift, Eduardo explained. She could see potential where others saw waste. She bought buildings nobody wanted in neighborhoods people were fleeing, then held them until those areas became valuable again. She invested in companies people laughed at. Apple in 1985, Amazon in 1997, Tesla in 2010. Small amounts that grew into fortunes. Why? Jennifer whispered. Why did she do all this? Because she was poor once and swore she'd never be poor again. And because, Eduardo paused, choosing his words carefully, because your father hurt her badly. When he demanded money, she refused to give him. When he accused her of hoarding wealth while he struggled, when he cut her out of his life, it broke something in her. She decided her fortune would go to someone who understood its value, someone who'd earned it through suffering, someone who wouldn't waste it on easy living. Jennifer thought about her father, the mechanic who drank, who bounced from job to job, who died in a car accident when Jennifer was 17. He'd never had money, never seemed to know how to keep it. She'd inherited his work ethic and his stubbornness, but not whatever gene makes someone good with finances. I don't know how to manage this kind of money, Jennifer admitted. I was a factory worker. Before that, I was a cashier. I have a GED and 6 months of community college. That's what I'm here for, Eduardo interrupted gently. Your grandmother established the trust with very specific instructions. You don't have to manage everything yourself. You have a team. Lawyers, accountants, investment managers, all of whom have been waiting for you just as long as I have. What do I need to do? First, we verify your identity beyond any doubt. DNA test comparing your sample to stored samples from your grandmother. Documentation proving your lineage. It's a formality. Your name, your children, your circumstances all match what Maria Elena predicted, but it's necessary for legal protection. Then what? Then you decide what to do with the most powerful tool in the world, money that can't be taken away. Over the next 3 hours, while the children played with the crayons Betty had scrounged up and drew pictures on the paper placemats, Eduardo explained how Jennifer's life was about to change. Accounts that would be opened, properties that would be transferred, a trust structure that would protect the wealth for generations while giving Jennifer access to whatever she needed. You could live on the interest alone, he said. Conservative investments would generate roughly $20 million per year, more than enough for any reasonable lifestyle. $20 million per year. Jennifer couldn't even conceptualize that number. She'd been making $28,000 at the factory before they laid everyone off. $20 million it was ridiculous. It was impossible. It was more money than anyone needed. What about the building? She asked. The incinerator plant. Technically yours, though. It's worth noting that the real estate value is minimal. Maybe $500,000 if you could find a buyer willing to take on the environmental remediation costs. Your grandmother purchased it as a hiding place for the vault, not as an investment. Can we live there? Eduardo's eyebrows rose. Ms. Torres, you can afford to live anywhere. A penthouse in San Francisco, a mansion in Beverly Hills. You could buy an entire block in Riverside if you wanted. Why would you want to live in a condemned industrial facility? Jennifer looked at her children, heads bent over their drawings. Carmen was sketching what looked like a castle. Diego was drawing a playground. Sofia was writing lists, always with the lists of things they needed, things they wanted, things they hoped for. "Because it's ours," Jennifer said simply. "Nobody gave it to us. Nobody handed us anything. We bought it ourselves. We claimed it. And maybe that matters." Eduardo studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "You really are Maria Elena's granddaughter. She would have said the exact same thing." He pulled out a folder full of documents. "These are the immediate action items. We'll need your signature on about 50 different things. After that, we can discuss long-term strategy. Can I ask you something first?" "Of course." "Why did my grandmother do it this way? Why make it so complicated? Why hide everything in a building nobody wanted?" Eduardo was quiet for a moment, remembering. "Because she was tested once, and she passed. When she came to this country with nothing, people who should have helped her turned her away. She slept in her car with your infant father. She worked 3 jobs and saved every penny. She was mocked for being cheap, for refusing to enjoy life, for being too cautious. But she knew something they didn't, that wealth isn't about spending, it's about accumulation, and that the truly wealthy don't advertise what they have. She wanted her heir to be someone who understood that, someone who'd been poor enough to see value in waste, someone who'd choose a condemned building over a shelter because at least the building was theirs. "She was looking for herself," Jennifer said quietly, "in the next generation. And she found you." The DNA test was conducted that afternoon in Eduardo's office, a surprisingly modest space in a strip mall, nothing like the gleaming towers Jennifer associated with wealthy lawyers. A technician swabbed Jennifer's cheek, sealed the sample in official-looking containers, and promised results within 48 hours. "Though we all know what they'll say," Eduardo commented as they waited for the technician to finish. "You have Maria Elena's jaw, her eyes, the way you count things with your fingers when you're thinking. It's like seeing her ghost." Jennifer had never thought of herself as resembling her grandmother. She'd barely known the woman, but now, looking at the old photographs Eduardo showed her, Maria Elena in her 20s arriving in America, in her 40s standing in front of her first investment property, in her 70s carefully documentation every asset for the granddaughter she'd never meet. Jennifer could see it. The same stubborn chin, the same worried eyes, the same look of someone who'd learned not to trust easy promises. "What should I do first?" Jennifer asked. "With the money, I mean. What would she have wanted?" "That's entirely up to you. The trust is structured to give you complete control once your identity is verified. You can do anything you want, give it all away, hoard it like a dragon somewhere in between." But Jennifer was already thinking about the last 11 days, the shelter with its waiting list, the food bank that was always running out, the families she'd met in parking lots at night, all of them living in their cars, all of them trying so hard to pretend everything was fine for their children's sake. "I want to help people," she said. "People like us, like we were yesterday." "That's very generous, but I'd encourage you to take some time before making any—" "No." Jennifer's voice was firm. "This money sat in a vault for 37 years while people suffered, while my father died broke, while I worked myself into exhaustion and still couldn't keep a roof over our heads. I don't want it to sit anymore. I want it to move, to work, to matter." Eduardo smiled. "You really are her granddaughter. What did you have in mind?" Jennifer thought about the incinerator plant, about the massive building that had once burned garbage to ash, destroying what wasn't wanted to reveal what was valuable, about her grandmother's letter. "You inherited what your abuela built from nothing." "I want to rebuild the plant," she said. "Turn it into housing for families in crisis. Not a shelter, those never have enough space. Something better, Apartments where people can live with dignity while they figure out their next steps. Job training, childcare, medical clinics, everything in one place. That's ambitious. Good. We'll call it the Maria Elena Torres Center. Not hiding what it is, not pretending it's something fancy, just honest help for people who need it. Your grandmother would love that. Eduardo made notes on his tablet. I can have a team start working on it immediately. Architects, contractors, environmental remediation specialists. It'll take time and money, but you have both now. How much time? Realistically, 2 years to renovate a building that size safely. 2 years. 730 days. While people slept in cars and children went hungry and families fell apart from the pressure of having nowhere to go. Jennifer thought about the vault beneath the incinerator, full of boxes carefully labeled and stacked. 37 years of waiting. Then we start today, she said. The rest of that week passed in a blur of lawyers and accountants and specialists of various types, all of them efficiently handling the mechanics of transferring $395 million from a dead woman's trust to her living granddaughter. The DNA results came back exactly as expected. Jennifer was indeed Maria Elena Torres's biological granddaughter, connected through her father's line. Congratulations, Eduardo said when he showed her the official paperwork. You're now one of the wealthiest women in California. It didn't feel real. Nothing felt real. Jennifer still drove the same rattling Dodge Caravan, still wore the same thrift store clothes, still bought the cheapest groceries and counted every penny, unable to shake decades of survival math. But now, technically, she could buy the entire grocery store if she wanted to. The children didn't fully understand what was happening. How could they? 1 week they were homeless. The next, they apparently owned a building and had more money than they could imagine. Jennifer tried to explain it in terms they could grasp. Remember when I told you we found treasure? She said one night as they sat in their claimed office space in the incinerator, eating takeout pizza that Jennifer had paid for without checking the price first. Well, the treasure is real. It's enough money that we never have to worry about food or rent or anything ever again. Like winning the lottery? Sofia asked, suspicious as always. Sort of, except we earned it. Great-Grandma Maria left it for us because she knew someday we'd need it. Did she know we'd be homeless? Carmen's voice was small. I don't think she knew exactly what would happen, but she knew that sometimes life is hard for people like us, and she wanted to make sure that when it got really hard, we'd have help. Are we rich now? Diego asked, the concept still too big for 6-year-old comprehension. Yeah, baby, we're rich now. Does that mean we can get a house with rooms and beds? Jennifer pulled him close. We can get whatever you need, but first, Mama needs to do something important. I need to fix this place, turn it into somewhere that helps other families like us. Like a superhero base? Diego's eyes lit up, exactly like a superhero base. Work on the Maria Elena Torres Center began immediately. Eduardo brought in a construction company that specialized in industrial remediation, and they descended on the incinerator plant like an army of salvation. Hazmat teams in full protective gear cataloged every chemical, every potential danger, every surface that would need specialized cleaning. It's bad, the lead contractor admitted during an early walkthrough. Asbestos in the insulation, lead paint on every surface, chemical residue from 3 decades of burning garbage, PCBs in the electrical systems. We're looking at $12 million just for environmental cleanup before we can start actual renovation. $12 million, Jennifer repeated, trying to make her brain accept that she could say yes to that number, that she had $12 million to spend on cleaning a building so other families could live safely. That's just the cleanup. Full renovation to convert this into residential units? You're looking at 60, maybe 80 million total. It's a massive undertaking. How long? Done right? 3 years, minimum. 3 years. Longer than Eduardo's estimate, 1,095 days while people suffered. What if we split it? Jennifer asked. Keep working on the long-term renovation, but convert part of the building first? Something we could open in 6 months? The contractor considered. Maybe. If we focus on the administrative wing first, that's in the best shape. We could create temporary housing there while we work on the rest. 20 apartments, communal kitchen, shared bathrooms. It wouldn't be pretty, but it could work. Do it! Over the next months, Jennifer watched her grandmother's fortune transform the incinerator plant from condemned wreckage to shelter. The work was constant and loud and expensive, so expensive that Jennifer had to keep reminding herself she could afford it. Every time she signed a check for another $1 million, part of her brain screamed that she was making a terrible mistake. But another part, the part that had slept in a van with 3 frightened children, knew exactly why she was doing this. They couldn't keep living in the plant during construction, so Jennifer finally agreed to rent a house. Nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom in a normal neighborhood with actual furniture and working appliances and bedrooms where the children didn't have to sleep in sleeping bags on concrete. Is this our house? Carmen asked the first night, standing in the middle of an empty living room that somehow seemed enormous. For now, until the center is ready. Can we decorate? Jennifer thought about her bank accounts. Plural now, because apparently when you had 395 million, you needed multiple accounts for different purposes, and how she could literally buy every decoration in every store in Riverside without making a dent. Yeah, baby, we can decorate. They spent a glorious Saturday at furniture stores and home goods shops, the children picking out beds and dressers and curtains and all the small things that made a house feel like home. Jennifer didn't look at prices, didn't calculate and recalculate what they could afford, just let her children be children for once, choosing things because they liked them, not because they were on clearance. The cashier at the last store looked at the total, $8,000 for furniture and decorations, and started to explain the payment plan options. Jennifer handed her a credit card, watched her eyes widen when it went through without question, and felt something shift inside her. This was real. The money was real. They were safe now. Actually, permanently, impossibly safe. The first 20 apartments in what would eventually be the Maria Elena Torres Center opened in May, 6 months after Jennifer bought the building for $700. They were simple, but clean. 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units with actual walls and doors, kitchenettes with working appliances, bathrooms that didn't leak, not luxury but dignified, safe. Jennifer stood in the courtyard she'd created from what used to be the loading bay, watching the first families move in. A mother with twin toddlers who'd been living in her car for 8 months. A grandmother raising 3 grandchildren after her daughter's arrest. Evicted from their apartment when she couldn't make rent. A father with sole custody of his disabled daughter, sleeping in a 24-hour diner parking lot because shelters didn't have facilities for her wheelchair. All of them chosen by the nonprofit Jennifer had created to run the center. All of them desperate, all of them trying so hard to pretend they weren't scared. "Welcome," Jennifer said as she greeted each family, handing them keys to their new apartments. "Stay as long as you need, no time limits, no judgment, just safety while you figure out what's next." "Why are you doing this?" one mother asked, clutching her key like it might disappear. "Nobody does something like this for nothing. What's the catch?" Jennifer smiled. "The catch is you have to accept help. That's harder than it sounds. I know I was you 6 months ago, sleeping in my van with 3 kids, convinced I could handle everything alone. What changed? Someone left me the keys to unlock what I needed. Jennifer gestured to the building around them, to the apartments and the community kitchen and the child care center and the job training classrooms and the medical clinic. All of it built from her grandmother's fortune, hidden in a place everyone thought was worthless. Now I'm passing them forward. The renovations continued. The initial 20 apartments became 40, then 60, then 80. The center expanded beyond just housing. Job training programs, GED classes, mental health counseling, legal aid for families dealing with custody or eviction proceedings. Everything Jennifer wished she'd had during those 11 days in the van. "You're building an empire," Eduardo observed during one of their monthly review meetings. They were sitting in what would eventually be the center's administrative offices, surrounded by construction noise and the smell of fresh paint. "The Maria Elena Torres Center is becoming legendary. I've had inquiries from other cities wanting to replicate the model." "Let them. I'll help fund it if they need capital. This shouldn't be unique. It should be everywhere." "Your grandmother would be so proud." Eduardo pulled out his tablet, pulling up financial reports. "Though I should mention, you're spending money faster than it's growing. The renovations, the programming, the operational costs. You've burned through about 40 million in 6 months. And I have 355 million left, plus whatever the investments are earning." "True, but at this rate—" "Eduardo." Jennifer cut him off gently. "I grew up poor. I understand saving. I understand being careful. But I also understand that money sitting in a vault doesn't help anyone. My grandmother spent 37 years accumulating wealth. I'm going to spend the next 37 years using it." He smiled. "Fair enough. Just promise me you'll leave enough for your children." Jennifer looked out the window at Sofia, Diego, and Carmen, who were playing in the courtyard with other kids from the center. Her children had their own bedrooms now, their own beds, their own sense of security, but they also had something more valuable. They'd learned what it felt like to have nothing, and now they were learning what to do when you had everything. "They'll inherit something better than money," Jennifer said. "They'll inherit the knowledge that we help people, because we've been helped. That wealth means nothing if it doesn't serve love. That treasure isn't what you hoard, it's what you share." Very philosophical. "My grandmother taught me that, even though she's been dead for decades. She left me a fortune hidden in garbage, wrapped in a lesson about seeing value where others see waste. Now I get to teach my children the same thing." The grand opening of the fully completed Maria Elena Torres Center happened on a Saturday in November, almost exactly 1 year after Jennifer had bought the building at auction. The transformation was staggering. What had been a condemned incinerator plant was now a thriving community of 150 apartments, communal spaces, classrooms, and support services. "This is incredible," the mayor said during her speech, standing in the massive courtyard where old machinery had been replaced with gardens and playgrounds. "This facility represents the largest private investment in homeless services in the state's history. Ms. Torres has single-handedly changed how we approach family homelessness." Jennifer stood at the back of the crowd, uncomfortable with the attention, watching families who'd moved in over the past year, watching children play who'd been sleeping in cars, watching mothers laugh who'd been crying when they arrived, watching fathers stand a little taller, no longer crushed by the weight of failing to provide shelter. "Mom!" Sofia appeared at her elbow, pulling her toward the front of the crowd. "They're calling for you. You have to make a speech." "I don't want to." "Mom, come on. You built this. You get to talk about it." Reluctantly, Jennifer made her way to the podium. A crowd of several hundred people looked back at her. Families from the center, construction workers who'd built it, support staff who ran the programs, politicians and reporters and community leaders who'd come to celebrate this impossible transformation. Hi," Jennifer started awkwardly, public speaking had never been her strength. I'm not good at speeches, so I'll keep this short. A year ago, I was homeless, not temporarily displaced, not between houses. Actually, literally, sleeping in my van with 3 kids homeless. I'd lost my job, lost my apartment, lost everything except my children and $700. The crowd was completely silent. I used that $700 to buy this building at a county auction. Everyone thought I was crazy. It was condemned, toxic, falling apart. But I was desperate, and desperate people see value where others see waste. What I found here changed everything. My grandmother, a woman I barely knew, had left me a fortune hidden inside this building. Not because I was special, because I was desperate enough to buy garbage. Jennifer gestured to the transformed space around them. She taught me that the truly valuable things are the ones everyone else has thrown away. The buildings nobody wants, the people society has given up on, the families we've decided aren't worth saving. This center exists because my grandmother believed desperate women given half a chance could change the world, because she knew what it felt like to have nothing and how much it means when someone offers everything. 150 families live here now. 150 families who were told there was no room, no space, no help available. 150 families who society had decided to throw away, like garbage. Except they're not garbage, they're treasure. Every single person here is treasure that was waiting to be found. My grandmother knew that. Now we all know it. Jennifer's voice grew stronger. This is just the beginning. We're opening 3 more centers in the next 2 years. 1 in Los Angeles, 1 in San Francisco, 1 in Sacramento. We're creating a model that other communities can follow. We're proving that homelessness isn't inevitable. It's a choice we're making as a society, and we're choosing differently. So I guess what I'm saying is, thank you. Thank you for believing that a homeless single mom could turn garbage into gold. Thank you for helping transform this place from a building that burned waste into a place that helps people rebuild. And thank you, Abuela Maria, wherever you are. You taught me that the best inheritance isn't money. It's the courage to use it for something that matters. The applause was deafening. Jennifer stepped away from the podium, overwhelmed, and found Eduardo waiting with a handkerchief for her tears. She heard you, he said simply. Maria Elena heard every word, and she's so very proud. That night, after the ceremonies ended and the crowds dispersed and the families returned to their apartments, Jennifer stood in the basement of the building, in the vault where she'd found her grandmother's fortune, hidden in boxes labeled with decades of careful planning. The room was mostly empty now. She'd moved the majority of the money to proper financial institutions, invested it in the kind of portfolios her grandmother would have approved of. But she'd left a few boxes, just enough to remember where it all started, just enough to understand the lesson. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sofia. "When are you coming home? Carmen wants you to read bedtime stories." Home. They had a real home now, a house they'd eventually buy instead of rent. Bedrooms and stability and the kind of security Jennifer had never known as a child. All because her grandmother had been poor once and refused to let another generation suffer the same way. Jennifer pulled out the original letter from her grandmother, the one that had started everything. She read it again, understanding it differently now. "Welcome home, my dear one. Your abuela has been waiting for you." She hadn't been waiting in the vault. She'd been waiting in the lesson, in the knowledge that desperate women who refuse to give up can transform ash into gold. That family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about seeing someone suffering and refusing to look away. That treasure isn't what you bury. It's what you share. Jennifer locked the vault for the last time and climbed back up to ground level, where her children were waiting and families were sleeping safely and her grandmother's fortune was finally doing what it was always meant to do: turn waste into value, garbage into gold, desperation into hope. She'd bought a condemned incinerator plant for $700 and found $385 million waiting underneath. But that wasn't the real miracle. The real miracle was learning that the only inheritance worth having is the one you give away. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.